Welcome back to Movie Review Mom. Thanks for spending a few minutes with me while I tell you about a movie so that you can make the best decision for you and your family as to whether or not you want to watch it. So, the movie that I'm reviewing today is called Radioactive. This movie is rated PG-13. It's an hour and 49 minutes. And the movie review mom grade I'm giving it is a B minus, and I'll explain why. But first of all, I was so thrilled to get an invitation from Amazon Prime Studio to preview this movie so I can give you guys the heads up and tell you about things that I liked and things I didn't like, as well as point out tips for parents and some themes that were really interesting that are worth talking about with people that you do see the movie with. So first, in a nutshell, directed by Marjane Satrapi. I hope I didn't say her name incorrectly, but I probably did. Anyway, this drama features the true story of Nobel Prize winning scientist and physicist Marie Sklodowska-Curie. We know her as Madame Curie or Marie Curie. She was born in 1867 to 1934. And in addition to the incredible contributions to physics and chemistry, she's the only woman and person to win 2 Nobel Prizes. So she was an incredible woman, and the movie is actually based on the graphic novel called Radioactive, Marie and Pierre Curie, A Tale of Love and Fallout by Lauren Redness, with the screenplay written by Jack Thorne. So this movie was supposed to debut for International Women's Day, but like all things affected by the pandemic, it was postponed until it's now being released on Amazon Prime this week. So better late than never, right? So some quick tips for parents are, first of all, most kids will be a little bit bored. It's very scientific-y and drama-y, not any action really to speak of, unless older teens are interested in science and history. And actually, you're going to learn a lot about Marie Curie. I had actually wanted to learn new things that I hadn't learned before. Now, of course, you could just read on Wikipedia and learn a lot more, but I was glad that I saw the movie. And I know some reviewers and critics out there are saying, oh, it was a waste of time, don't even bother. But I enjoyed it. I learned some things from it. So I'm not going to say that. But back to tips for parents. The movie addresses equal rights for women and kind of that double standard for men and women. And so it would be a really good discussion to talk to your kids about that time period and how difficult it must have been to be a woman in a man's world trying to do the things that she was trying to do, or really a lot of the things any woman wanted to do back then. Now, as a heads up for parents, there is a scene where you see 2 naked people run off and jump into a lake, and you see skin and a couple of body parts. And I was surprised by that because this is a PG-13 movie, and I wondered why they would do that. And because it doesn't really add anything to the story. I mean, you could have explained that these people had a relationship without showing that. And then later you see a married couple in bed, and then later you see an unmarried couple in bed, and there's no action. So I don't know why they threw in that little naked person moment. There is talk of infidelity and talk of intimate relationships. Now, some interesting themes that are definitely worth talking about with your family or other people you see the movie with are, first, I'll give you a quote by Madame Curie. She says, "The things that make us weak are the things that make us strong." So see if you can figure out what that means. Certainly persistence, determination, the quest for knowledge, choices and consequences, humanity, love of science and romantic love, humility in the face of innovation and invention, and whether or not mankind is ready for the benefits of nature and science, or whether we will use those inventions and discoveries to do harm. Now, some things that I really liked are, first of all, Rosamund Pike. She is excellent in everything that she does. She gives a great performance. There's a moment of poignant symbolism where she's talking about radium and she says it doesn't behave like it should. And that's kind of symbolic for how she is as a woman in her time period, how she was always pushing the boundaries and pushing the status quo. The movie starts out showing off its age-defying magic on Rosamund Pike as an older woman, and then you see her kind of reflect back on her life and all that happened as you move into the past. And then, of course, it ends again with her also ageified and old. And I don't know why, but I always get a kick out of that. It's seeing how makeup and CGI work. It's helpful to have a character in the movie who doesn't understand science so that Marie and Pierre can explain to her and to us the significance and why they're doing what they do. And so there's a little bit of exposition, but honestly, most people will go, oh, okay, as they learn what's going on. Now, during this whole movie, I kept thinking about the university students that I teach online and how this week they've actually been writing essays about which counts more, hard work or talent. And I think that this movie answers that debate to some extent. I think while she was brilliant, Marie Curie had to work extremely hard to achieve her goals. And so you might be born with a brilliant mind or be exceptionally talented in something, but hard work is absolutely required in order to achieve the level of excellence that you could or should. There's an interesting scene where Marie and her husband Pierre argue about whether religion could be considered a science. And she just absolutely dismisses it, which kind of surprised me because, she was always trying to be open-minded and look for opportunities for discovery. And I think all scientists should be open-minded as they explore possibilities in the search for truth. So I thought that was kind of an interesting scene. There are also some scenes that show future events and consequences of Marie Curie's discoveries. And in most cases, they're very powerful, albeit forced. She definitely worried whether or not her work would be helpful or harmful. And another character tells her that her job was to bring light to the world, literally, and to not worry about the ripples. And I thought that that was an interesting line. Now, speaking of lines, let me tell you a few things that I didn't like. Some of the dialogue is very forced and a little bit clumsy, even in the filmmaking of the whole movie. I've read some really negative reviews, and I don't think that the movie deserves that, but I can tell that the director wanted to get artsy fartsy and poignant about the life of Marie Curie. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't quite work. Now, I have no idea what Marie Curie was like in real life, but it always annoys me when movies portray brilliant people as stubborn and even rude. Like, the old TV series House. Of course, he was brilliant, but he was just a jerk. And I'm not saying she was a jerk, but she was often very rude and she dismissed people because they just weren't as smart as her. I wish that the movie had spent more time on the good things that Marie Curie's discoveries accomplished, like the X-ray machine and cancer treatments, among many, rather than just on the deadly bombs that would destroy life in the future, which of course it did. Some of the music was a little bit odd and distracting, and all of the characters seemed to age except for this one guy, Professor Lippman, played by Simon Russell Beale. Not his fault, of course, but it just didn't seem to be congruent with the aging of the other characters. The color palette is very gray in the 1800s when the movie starts, which I think is appropriate. But then I felt like things should have been lightened up a little bit more once we got into the turn of the century, into the 1900s. And then one thing that just drives me nuts, and it drives all Americans nuts, honestly. And so if you're British, Don't get mad at me. It's not just me, but it's such a dumb little thing. But why don't British people say, we're going to the hospital? They always say, we're going to hospital. Now, there were actually a lot of lines that I wrote down that I thought were really good. So be sure and run over to moviereviewmom.com, where I write down all the funny lines and interesting lines that grab my attention. But I'll share a couple of them with you right now. One is Marie Curie is having this conversation with one of her young daughters, and she says, "What are you thinking about?" And the little girl says, "I don't know." And so Marie Curie says, "You must always be thinking about something." And I thought that was interesting. And then later, that same little girl, when she turns 18 years old, becomes a nurse and is impassioned in the war effort and tries to get her mother involved. And she says to her mom, "It's time to make this war your war." And I really appreciated that she didn't want her mother to just sit on her laurels and accomplishments, but to do more good in the world, because her mother was not involved in the war, really. And so she does get involved. And that's really inspiring, that as you look around the world and in this pandemic world that we're having, to not just be a hermit and sit in your house and wait until the whole thing is over, but to look out your window and look and see what good can you do to ease suffering in what's happening in our world today. There is much good that you can do, and the world needs you. Now, I'll finish up with just a few recommendations for movies that I think you might like. There's definitely the theme of women being able to stand up for themselves and be rewarded for their accomplishments. And so a movie that I thought about while I was watching this movie was called Big Eyes with Amy Adams. It's also a true story. So check that one out. And then another movie that's also produced by Amazon is The Aeronauts. And it was good. It wasn't great, but it kind of almost had a familiar feeling to it that this movie had, that the two seem to go well together. And then the third movie, again, that kind of rounds out that desire for discovery, that desire to break the status quo and do something more, again, back in the 1800s, 1900s, is The Professor and the Madman. Again, that one wasn't an A+ movie, but if you like this movie, I think that you'll really like that one as well. It's good, and you'll learn a lot, so I always appreciate that. All right, that's it for my review. I hope if you see this movie that you really enjoy it, that you learned something, and that you're inspired by it, and that you'll want to glow in this world. Not with radioactivity, but with your love and goodness. All right, that's it. I will catch you in the next one. Bye for now.